Oh, what's up, KDA fans? The Jizz has returned for the second upload of the day. Can we get a like for that? And in this episode, the Jizz is going to be revealing the 10 best champions for the upcoming 11-16 patch. And you might be like, why aren't you doing 20 champions like you usually do? Well, because I want to give you as much info as possible in regards to these 10 picks. It's that simple. So you will learn what to build, more runes to run, and even a cheeky tip or two for each of these champs so you can insta-send it in 11-16. But even with this red hot information, you still might stay hard stuck. So the only real solution out there is to buy a boost by signing up to the GameLeap website, because our challenger tier courses, guides, and high elo VOD analyses are going to help you boost your own game to the point where climbing is just inevitable. So embrace more of the Jizz by signing up for that exclusive access. Links in the description and comment section. Alright, so let's get into the countdown, guys, and coming in at number 10 is Lee Sin. And Lee Sin is getting nerfed next patch, so your W sustain is going down at each rank. Now this is going to be more impactful for lane Lee Sin, so if you're playing him in the mid and top lane, because you're getting less sustain, and in the jungle as well, it'll have a little bit of an impact because you're going to be healing less from when you're auto-attacking monsters with the second part of your W. So you might come out of it with less HP, so that gank, that fight at Scuttle Crab, you're going to be more killable. But the fact is, guys, this nerf is so minor that Lee Sin is still going to be super strong. And one of the reasons Lee Sin is so strong is because of that build. With your core build of Gore Drinker, Black Cleaver, and then Steris Gauge, you have the sustain, you have the attack damage, you have the HP, the mythic passive from Gore Drinker, which is giving you ability haste, means that as a champion, you know, who relies on cooldowns, your QWE and your ultimate, you're getting your basic abilities off multiple times in team fights, and the low cooldown on your ultimate gives you the opportunity to make plays in the mid and late game. Now, in terms of your boost, you've got a few options. You can go with Ninja Tabis, play to Steel Caps. If you're against a lot of AD, you can go cooldown boost to Snowball even harder than you already are, or you can go with Merc Treads against a heavy CC or AP composition. And in terms of your runes, guys, for Lee Sin, there's only really one page you need. Conqueror is your keystone, then you're going to take Triumph. You can take Alacrity next, or you can take Tenacity if you're against a lot of CC. So if you think you're going to get rooted, stunned for multiple seconds, take Tenacity, then Coup de Grace, so your Q does even more execute damage, and then as your secondary tree, we're taking Inspiration with Magical Footwear, and then Cosmic Insight. The cooldown, the free boots, this is really useful. And as for your minor runes, you're taking Attack Speed to help with that clear and that DPS, Adaptive Force, and then Armor or Magic Resist, depending on the jungle matchup itself. Now, just one quick tip for Lee Sin, guys, when you are playing him. Lots of Lee Sins go for max range Qs. I think all of us have done this at some point. So what I want you to do from now on, especially from level 6 onwards, I want you to use your Q as part of your ultimate almost. So you're going to kick that enemy champion and then use your Q because it's guaranteed at that point. They cannot move out of that line you kick them in. This means because you are landing your Q, you're not going to miss them, and you're going to be dealing more damage and getting more kills as a result. So make sure you do this. Stop going for max range Qs. Now, ahead of Lee Sin, guys, coming in at number 9 is SYLAS. And despite the recent changes in 11-15 that nerfed your W and buffed your Q, SYLAS is still proving to be, guys, one of the best and most versatile mid laners. Like, if you pick him in any game, he's going to be useful because, well, especially in solo queue, you're always going to have an ultimate on the enemy team that you can use and abuse. But like all these champions, guys, on this list, the build is the backbone. This is why they are strong. So for SYLAS, taking Everfrost, which remember is now 200 gold cheaper, and it's just the most ideal mythic and one of the most dangerous mythic champion combinations in the game. The Everfrost root, even the slow, lets you land your E into your Q, into all of your combo, all of your abilities, so your DPS, your damage output is nutty. And after Everfrost, guys, what you want to be building in pretty much every single game, unless you have a Dark Seal in there and a lot of Magi Sacks, is Zhonya's Hourglass and Cosmic Drive in either order here. So if you're against a heavy AD team or a heavy dive composition, Zhonya's is going to be very useful because of the active. This lets you buy the time you need to get your cooldowns back up so you can then go ham. And Cosmic Drive, for that ability haste, the health and the AP is kind of useful, but that ability haste is going to push you over the top. This is the core build. And then as for your boots, well, all you have to do is just buy Lucidity boots every game and you'll put yourself in a position to hard carry. Now, in terms of your runes for SYLAS, guys, really there's only one page you need. That starts as Conqueror for your keystone for the stacking, Presence of Mind for the sustain, Tenacity, because SYLAS, one of your big strengths is being mobile. We don't want to be locked down, and then Last Stand. This means that for Last Stand, you're going to be dealing more damage with your W, and as a result, healing for more as well. And then as your secondary tree, take Inspiration with Biscuit Delivery for that lane sustain, and Cosmic Insight for the Summoner Spell haste and the item haste more importantly, so Everfrost root and the Zhonya's active. And then for your minor runes, 2 Adaptive Force and then Armor or Magic Resist, depending on the matchup here. Now, just a quick tip for SYLAS, guys, that is going to help you in the laning phase, especially when you're trading with the enemy champion. Using your abilities in combination with one another is so important. Some champions like Syndra, for example, all you really need is your Q to be effective in lane. But for SYLAS, you want to try and harmonize all of your basic abilities, so your Q, W, and E. This is going to give you the most amount of damage possible and the most trading potential. So when you are in the lane, try to combine your abilities together. So you have a slow in your Q, so what you could do is Q, the slow hit, hits, and then you jump onto the enemy champion with your chain. This is going to increase the chance of chaining them because they are slowed. Or what you could also do, if there's space in between the minion wave or around the minion wave, you can E towards the enemy champion and then W to them, so you instantly gap close, and then that is going to give you a better chance of landing your chains and then your Q as a result. Now, beating SYLAS to the number 8 spot for 11-16, guys, is FIORA. And FIORA is getting nerfed next patch, so your E's cooldown at later ranks is going down. But when you do max your E at level 13, you've probably already got enough ability haste for this cooldown. Well, let me put it this way, you're not going to notice it. So this nerf is really pin and doesn't mean anything. FIORA is still going to be nut. And even though FIORA's items, and we'll get into them in a second, are really good, the fact that Riot buffs your passive earlier in the season, this is the real strength of FIORA at the moment, so your vitals are doing more damage. But yes, the build as well. What you want to be going, guys, is Gore Drinker as your mythic item. Then you want to be going with Ravenous Hydra, which gives you a ridiculous amount of sustain and ability haste, attack damage as well. And after that, it's really up to you. You can go with Sterix Gauge for the anti-burst, and there is so much burst in the game. This is also going to be useful in pretty much every single scenario. So Sterix Gauge is the most reliable third major item. You can go for Death Stance if you're against a heavy AD team. You can go with Hullbreaker if you just want to split push for eternity. And you can even go Guardian's Angel if you want the armor in that split push as well. So if you're against an auto attacker like Jax, for example, the armor is going to come in really handy. Now, in terms of your runes for FIORA, guys, you have 3 options here. So your keystone for 2 of these pages is going to be Conqueror with Triumph, Tenacity, and then Last Stand. And your secondary tree with Conqueror as your major keystone is going to depend on the matchup, guys. If you think you have a free laning phase, you know the matchup isn't really that difficult, you can take Magical Footwear and Biscuit Delivery. The free boots is going to save you 300 gold, and Biscuit Delivery is there for your lane sustain. The other option, if you're into a matchup that's going to be trade heavy, you can go Second Wind and then Overgrowth. Now, Second Wind is great because you're going to regenerate health over time, so after that trade happens, you're going to get that health back, because FIORA in the early game doesn't really have that much sustain. And then Overgrowth is just useful for that HP you're going to get as well. And in all of these pages, by the way, guys, make sure to run attack speed in your mana runes, adaptive force, and then armor or magic resist depending on the matchup. And the last rune page you can consider going is Grasp of the Undying as your major keystone, Demolish, Second Wind, and then Revitalize. And in the secondary tree, you can run Tenacity and then Last Stand. Now, the reason we run Grasp of the Undying here is because we're into hard early game matchups. So if you're against a champion who might have kill pressure on you early, potentially a Darius or Riven, one of these really bruisery 1v1 fighter matchups, taking this rune page is going to give you that trading potential and the sustain you need to outlane them. So make sure you have these 3 rune pages ready to go. So what I want you to do, guys, when you are trading with enemy champions, I want you to weave auto attacks in between your abilities here. Remember, your E cancels your auto attack animation, so you can auto attack and then E. Your Q, you can do the same thing. You can auto attack before your Q or after your Q as well. And what this means is that in terms of DPS, of course, we're maximizing this, but also if you're running Conqueror, this is going to give you the most damage possible, and this is what it's about, being efficient. I can't stress to you how important this is. Now, ahead of FIORA, guys, we're going to stay in the top lane here is Tahm Kench. And for Tahm Kench, despite getting nerfed next patch, so your passive magic damage is down, and your healing from your Tongue Lash is going down as well when you hit enemy champions. So in terms of sustain and actual damage output, these are lower, but not really by that much. So Tahm Kench, again, is going to be super busted. And one of the big reasons why still is because your auto attacks and your Q are applying your acquired taste passive magic damage. So when your Q is landing onto that enemy champion, you are giving them that extra damage from your passive, which now applies more damage based on your bonus health. So your bonus health from your items. This is why for Tahm Kench, guys, in terms of the build, you're going with Frostfire Gauntlet for the health it's giving you from the mythic passive. So we're maximizing that passive damage with your Q. And then your other item, guys, which synergizes with Frostfire, is Anathema's Chains. And remember, this new item that came into League, this is the anti-mobility item that you need on Tahm Kench, because if you're against mobile champions, and in the top lane, lots of champions are mobile at the moment, if you think of Riven, CAMILLE, FIORA, you want to lock these down. But it's also great against enemy AD carries and assassins. But you can also get an early Bramble Vest in the laning phase, guys, if you're against a heavy auto attacker or AD based champion, and then you can build this into a Thornmail later. Or you can also go for a Spirit Visage if you're against an AP champion in the top lane like Mordekaiser, for example, or a heavy AP based team. And as for your boots, you have 2 options. You can go with Plated Steel Caps against attack damage or Merc Trades against that AP. Now for your runes, guys, what you want to be taking is Grasp of the Undying for the lane sustain. This can also be procced with your Q. You want Demolish into easy lanes against, weak early game champions where you're actually going to be hitting the enemy tower, or Shield Bash into strong early game champions. Then you want Second Wind for sustain into pretty much everything apart from maybe IRELIA. In that matchup, you'd take Bone Plating. And then you want Unflinching as your last resolve rune to help with your stickiness. Now in your secondary tree, it really depends on your playstyle here. You can take Alacrity and Tenacity, which helps with your trading and wave clear, and your stickiness and your potential to W out of fights. So if you're an aggressive catfish, that's the setup for you. But if you like playing a bit more passive and team oriented, God help you, in your your secondary tree, take approach velocity for the movement speed so you can save your teammates and lock down enemies as well, and then biscuit delivery for the lane sustain. Now, a quick tip that will help you never die to a jungle gank. Lots of Tahm Kench players will W before the enemy champions have used their cooldowns, but your W can be easily interrupted. This might be a Xin Zhao knockup, a Viego stun, a Darius pull. So I know it sounds scary, but if you just let the enemy champions jump on you and use their CC, it's then actually safer to abyssal dive out of there, knowing it cannot get interrupted. Of course, if the enemy champs have used their key CC, by all means W ASAP, but definitely something to keep in mind. And for your minor runes on Tahm Kench, guys, take attack speed and then armor and armor, or magic resist and magic resist, depending on the matchup you are in. Now, ahead of Tahm Kench, guys, we have ZIGGS, and I think we all know how strong ZIGGS is in the bot lane at the moment, right? And next patch, even though you're getting nerfed, nothing is going to change. So what's happening is that your mana is going back to 480, your ease damage per mind is going down in the early laning phase, but it's actually going up in the mid to late game. But the slow for these mines is going down at earlier ranks. Now, the slow really doesn't mean that much, and having more mana in the laning phase just means you're going to be more of a lane bully. So for ZIGGS in 11-16, you're going to be even stronger. Now, if you are going ZIGGS in the bot lane, guys, you'll build Liandry's Anguish. This being 200 gold cheaper, just like Everfrost with SYLAS. This is great. You're getting to that mythic spike quicker. And then what you want after that, it's really up to you, to be honest. You can get Morella Nomicon, because in the bot lane, you're probably going to be going up against shield bow AD carries with healing supports next to them. And because Gore Drinker is so popular right now, Morella's is always going to be valuable. Or what you can go for is Demonic Embrace if you're against a very tanky HP team. Or you can go for Horizon Focus for maximum damage output. And even Void Staff if the enemy champions are building a lot of magic resist. Now, in terms of your boots, always go Sorcerer's Shoes. This is going to maximize that damage output. And in terms of your runes, guys, it's quite simple. This is the page you're going to run. Comet, Mana Flow Band, Transcendence, and then Scorch. And then for your secondary tree, take Inspiration with Magical Footwear and Biscuit Delivery for that lane sustain so you can go crazy with the spells. And in your mana runes, 2 Adaptive Forces and then Armor. Now, just a quick tip for ZIGGS, guys, and this is honestly what makes him so OP in the bot lane as well. Your W, okay? So the Turret Explosion passive with your Satchel Charge. So get this, at just level 1, your W is going to deal 25%, the demolition threshold that is, of the turret's maximum HP. So when the tower has 1 1/4 plates left, guys, your W can actually execute that tower. And guess what? You're getting all that first tower gold to yourself, and this lets you get to your mythic spike before anyone else in the game. So as a snowballing champion, this helps with that. And yeah, who doesn't want the first tower in the game? Now, into the top 5, guys, we go, and coming in at number 5 is CAMILLE. And for CAMILLE, we all know why she's strong, right? She has a Cho'Gath ultimate in her Q, especially in the late game. And with Divine Sunder, how good that item is, she's too darn broken. And in terms of your build here, guys, you have 2 core items. So you have Divine Sunder that I just mentioned, the health damage, the Spellblade passive, it's all very useful. Then you have Ravenous Hydra here. And like with FIORA, the sustain, the ability haste, the attack damage, you hit like a truck and you're still so hard to bring down because of that sustain. And as your third major item here, you really have a choice. You can go with Steris Gauge, you can go with Death's Dance, you can go with Guardian's Angel, you can go with Chempunk Chainsword if you're against healing, you can go with Hullbreaker if you just want to split push and 1v9. You really have so many options, but to be honest, Steris Gauge, always going to work, the most consistent. And then as for your boots, you have 3 options. Lucidity boots, if you don't think you need plated steel caps or mercury treads, Lucidity boots just give you that extra cooldown you need to get off those Cho'Gath ultimates and fights. Ninja Tabis are great, of course, into AD heavy teams, and then merc treads against CC and AP. Now for CAMILLE, guys, in terms of your runes, you have 2 options here. If you're into weak laners, so if you're against the Nasus, for example, you can bully in the laning phase, you're going to be taking Conqueror, Triumph, Alacrity, and then Last Stand. You can take Coup de Grace, but most of these champions you're going to be good into early game are going to be tanky. So you take Coup de Grace if you really think you can kill them early on, or you can just take Last Stand, which, yeah, it's probably the most consistent here. And then as your secondary tree, you take Magical Footwear and then Biscuit Delivery. For your minor runes, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and Armor, or Magic Resist, depending on the matchup. And your other tree you can go, if you're into a trading matchup or a hard early game matchup against a Darius, against a FIORA, you can take Grasp of the Undying, then Shield Bash, which works for your passive, Bone Plating, and then Unflinching. And then the same secondary tree, so Magical Footwear and Biscuit Delivery, and same minor runes, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, Armor, or Magic Resist. Now, just a couple of quick tips here, guys, that's going to help you with playing CAMILLE in the laning phase. If you want to trade with the enemy champion, one combo you can use is queuing a minion, so you get the movement speed from the first part of your queue, and then you can W and make sure you hit the outer part of your cone. This is going to slow the enemy champion. And what this means, because you're getting movement speed and the enemy champion is slowed, you can get in range to then use your Q2. Late game, this is going to be really impactful, of course, because you have so much damage in your precision protocol, so make sure you get this down pat. But notice how I didn't mention your E here. You are always going to save your E unless you have kill potential and you really want to trade with the enemy champion, or if you don't want to trade, so you're using it to escape that gank or that fight. Now, coming in next, guys, a similar champion to CAMILLE, we have RIVEN, who is untouched this patch, and with your high attack damage, with your low cooldowns, RIVEN is in the best spot she's been in seasons. And what you're building, guys, for your first 2 items are always going to be Gore Drinker and then Black Cleaver. Now as your third item, you really have a choice here. You can go with Death Stance if you're against attack damage champions, GA if you want to 1v1 the enemy top laner, Steris Gauge if you want to fight in team fights, Serylda's Grudge if you want to go really aggressive into armor heavy teams and snowball, and for your boots, well, you have a few options. You can go with Lucidity Boots for the cooldown, always going to be useful on Riven, Plated Steel Caps if you're against attack damage, and then Merc Treads if you're against AP. Now in terms of rune pages for Riven, guys, you have 3 setups here, but all of them are going to have Conqueror, then Triumph. You can either take Alacrity or Tenacity. Again, Alacrity is more offensive, it lets you stack quicker, also your combos will feel cleaner, and your wave clear and split pushing on the enemy towers, whereas Tenacity is if you're against heavy CC, and then Last Stand, because you are a drain tank as Riven, you're going to be getting low in fights, so having Last Stand increases your damage when you're on the brink, and this also enhances your wind slash damage. But the secondary tree, this is where it gets interesting. What lots of players are doing at the moment is taking Transcendence and Gathering Storm. Now remember, Riven in the mid to late game, when her E is on a 3-second cooldown, it is just ridiculous. And remember that ability haste is uncapped, so with Transcendence, you're never going to overcap, and you have so much of it, it's like impossible to die. And then Gathering Storm is in there for that late game scaling. But if you want to go a bit more defensive, if you're not quite sure what to do on Riven, or if you're into a heavy trading lane, maybe you're scared of the enemy Darius, then I would highly recommend taking Shield Bash, which is going to give your E more of a shield and protect yourself, and then Bone Plating, which means that when you are trading with enemy champions, you're going to take less damage for that trade. But it's very important, guys, if you're playing Riven, to play around that Bone Plating cooldown when you are trading. Try to synergize that with your cooldowns themselves. And then the final page you can go with is if you're in a laning phase, which is probably going to be easy for you, you can take Magical Footwear and then Futures Market. Now Futures Market is in here so you can get that Iron Spike Whip on your first base, and then you can get to Gore Drink and you don't have to worry about going some whack build. And in terms of your minor runes, guys, what you're always going to be going is Adaptive Force in each of the first 2, and then Armor or Magic Resist. Now one quick tip on Riven, I was even coaching an ex-challenger Riven recently. Please guys, do not, if the enemy champion runs into you, please do not just use your ability to start off your combo. If they run into you, just auto attack them, and then you're going to use your abilities, because remember guys, all of your abilities are going to reset your auto attack animation. So when you auto attack in Q, you auto attack again. When you auto attack in W, you auto attack again. And because you're passive, this is going to give you a ridiculous amount of damage in a short period of time. And because you're running Conqueror as well, it makes even more sense. So please do this. Don't just use your abilities and that's it. Auto attack before your abilities and after them as well. Now starting off the top 3, guys, by the way, if you're enjoying the in-depth detail I'm giving you in this video, even though it's just 10 champions, I think it's going to be useful for you. Let me know by leaving a like down below. And coming in at number 3 is KATARINA, who is the #1 mid, well, the second best mid laner actually, for 11-16. And for KATARINA, guys, the main reason she is so broken is because of that build of hers. So what you're going to be doing is getting Hextech Rocket Belt first, followed by a Nash's Tooth. Now Hextech Rocket Belt is great for the innate dash it gives you and the magic penetration passive, so your damage is going to be off chops. But Nash's Tooth, this is the real selling point here. This means that attack speed and the on hit you're getting from Nash's is getting pumped into your kit because of the changes earlier in the season. Thanks, Riot. And then after that, guys, it's really up to you. If you're snowballing, you can get a Void Staff if the enemy team has magic resist. You can get a Death Cap if they've got no magic resist and you want to one-shot everyone. Or the most consistent, and what I would recommend, you get a Zhonya's Hourglass. And in terms of your boots, Sorcerer Shoes every day of the week. Now the runes for KATARINA, guys, you have a couple of options here. If you're against squishy enemy champions, you can take Electrocute with Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, and then Relentless Hunter. As your secondary tree, we're going with Precision, so we're having Triumph and then Coup de Grace. Now Triumph is really useful because you're all about those skirmishes, and Coup de Grace just maximizes that damage output against these squishy champions. But if you're against tankier opposition, if you're against a champion like a SYLAS, for example, or a Galio, Conqueror is going to be the keystone for you. Tenacity and then Coup de Grace, because with Tenacity, you know, we don't want to get CC'd. It is the enemy of KATARINA, okay? So we want Tenacity so we can stay mobile, and then use your secondary tree, Domination with Sudden Impact, and Ravenous Hunter here. And just quickly, the reason we go Ravenous in this setup is just because of that sustain, whereas we go Relentless with Electrocute because we're about roaming and just one-shotting enemy champions and snowballing. Now in both cases, guys, take Adaptive Force in your minor runes and then Armor or Magic Resist as the last one depending on the matchup. Now just a quick general tip for KATARINA, guys. In the early laning phase, right, this is when you are most vulnerable. But what lots of KATARINAs do, they open themselves up to damage from the enemy champions. I was even playing against some diamond mid laner recently. I was playing as Twisted Fate and I killed him at level 2, and I'm thinking to myself, why don't you just move back and stay healthy? Because when you get to level 2, level 3, guys, as KATARINA, that's when you can start to do stuff. But you can't do stuff if you're on 200 HP. So in the first couple of levels, if the enemy champion is pressuring you, just back up. Let them pressure you, but don't lose any HP for it. Preserve that HP so your power spike is way more of a power spike, and you will see the results. Now the runner-up, guys, to the best champion of 11-16, this is Fiddlesticks. So if you want an AP jungler to pick, it has to be the Sticks. And the reason the Sticks is coming in is a bit like KATARINA, the build is too good, but also the champion. So the build, Hextech Rocket Belt, the magic penetration, the dash, this lets you gap close to the enemy champions after you use your Crow Storm, and pair this with Sorcerer Shoes, it's like all you need. Now after that, Zhonya's Hourglass is always going to be your next buy, so that's your core items, guys. Hexstroke Rocket Belt and then Zhonya's Hourglass. And after that, it's really up to you. You can go Banshee's Veil, Morellonomicon, Void Stuff. It's really up to you, and it depends on the enemy team composition. And in terms of your runes for Fiddlesticks, guys, you actually have a few options here. In terms of Keystone anyway, you can go Electrocute if you're against squishy enemy champions. You can go Predator for more of a map presence. You can go with Dark Harvest if you really think you're going to get stacks because the enemy champions are killable. But after that, that's where it stays the same. So Cheap Shot, always. Eyeball Collection, Ultimate Hunter for more ultimates. And then your secondary tree, Inspiration with perfect timing for that Zhonya's Hourglass and Cosmic Insight. 2 Adaptive Force in your minor runes, and then Armor or Magic Resist. And just a little tip for Fiddlesticks here, guys, and it's probably an obvious one, but still, it's really important. Try to always use your W when you're farming camps, or even if you're team fighting. Use your W on as many enemy champions and monsters as possible. Not only is this really important for your healing, but also for the damage you're putting out during team fights, so try to plonk yourself right in the middle before you start Wing. Now, the number 1 champion, guys, for 11-16, this is IRELIA. And I'm going to give you the tip for IRELIA right now. Just pick her, and you auto-win. She's that good. Now, next patch, she isn't getting nerfed, so all her strength at the moment is still going to be there. And in terms of your build, guys, for IRELIA, your first item is always going to be Bork, Blade of the Ruined King, and you can follow this with either Immortal Shield Bow if you're against AD-based champions, or with Wit's End if you're against a lot of AP. And after that, it really depends again on who you're against. If you're against AD champions, Titanic Hydra is great, Death's Dance is great, Guardian's Angel is great. If you're against AP, then you can go Spirit's Visage after that Wit's End and Shield Bow combination. So again, it really depends on what you're going to be go against, but your first 2 to 3 items are always going to include Blade of the Ruined King and Immortal Shield Bow. And in terms of your rune pages, guys, for IRELIA, you have 2 options here. If you're about trading into that enemy champion, this might be a Yone or a Yasuo, you're going to be taking Conqueror with Presence of Mind, Alacrity, and then Last Stand. And in your secondary tree, Bone Plating and Unflinching. In your minor runes, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and Armor or Magic Resist. But if you're not going to be fighting the enemy champion as much, they might be playing a really passive laner like a Vigar, for example, then you're going to be taking Conqueror, Triumph, Tenacity, and then Last Stand, because it's very unlikely we're going to fight them as much as a Yasuo or a Yone. And as your secondary tree, take Inspiration with Biscuit Delivery and then Time Warp Tonic. And as for your runes, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and then Armor or Magic Resist. So those are the top 10 champions, guys, for 11-16. Let me know in the comments what exactly you think of this list, and make sure on your way out to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss our next video, which will be uploaded tomorrow. And until then, this has been the Jizz. Bye.